My name is Mara. I'm 34 years old. And the day I'm about to describe started at a cemetery and ended with a phone call that made my mother-in-law go completely silent for the first time in 11 years. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened. I wasn't angry that day. Not really. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones after grief that nobody around you has the patience to keep acknowledging. And I had just spent 2 hours sitting beside my daughter's grave, talking to her the way you do when you have nowhere else to put the things you're feeling. Her name was Lily. She was 3 years old when she died. That was 14 months before this story happened. I need you to understand the house before I tell you what I came home to. The room at the end of the upstairs hallway, the one with the yellow curtains I had sewn myself, the small white bookshelf still full of picture books, the watercolor butterflies I painted on the wall during the second trimester, that was Lily's room. After she passed, my husband Daniel and I made a quiet decision together. We wouldn't rush to change anything. The room would stay. Not as a shrine. Not out of denial. But because we weren't ready and we didn't owe anyone a timeline. We had told his mother this. Sandra. Directly, calmly, more than once. She had nodded. She had said she understood. She had used the word of course in a tone that I would later realize meant nothing at all. I came home from the cemetery on a Wednesday afternoon in October. The sky was low and gray and the kind of cold that smells like wood smoke and wet leaves. I had stopped at a gas station on the way back, bought a coffee I didn't really want, and driven the last 20 minutes in silence with the radio off. I noticed the moving truck before I turned into the driveway. White. Large. Backed up close to the front door. I sat in my car for a moment. Confused. We weren't moving. We hadn't ordered anything. Daniel was at work. I knew this. I walked inside. Sandra was standing in the center of the living room with a clipboard. An actual clipboard. Two men I didn't recognize were carrying boxes down the stairs. One of them was holding the small white bookshelf. Lily's bookshelf. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Something in me went very, very still. Sandra turned and saw me. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize for the surprise. She smiled with the practiced warmth of someone who has already rehearsed the conversation and decided it was going to go her way. Mara, she said. Good timing. We're turning the room into a nursery for Jason's baby. He and Brittany are due in April. They need the space, and this house has been sitting with that room closed for over a year. She said it the way you announce a renovation. Casually. Efficiently. Like a project manager wrapping up a call. I looked at the bookshelf in the stranger's hands. I looked at the boxes being stacked near the door. I looked at Sandra and her clipboard. And then I pulled out my phone. I should explain something about Jason. He is Daniel's younger brother. He is also Sandra's favorite in the way that some parents have favorites and consider it a private matter until it stops being convenient to keep private. Jason had never particularly liked me. I had always understood this. I was too quiet for his taste, too unbothered by his opinions. When Lily was born, he came to the hospital once, stayed for 20 minutes, and spent most of it talking about his gym membership. When Lily died, he sent a text message. One sentence. Then nothing. 14 months later, his girlfriend was pregnant, and apparently that meant Lily's room was available for reassignment. What Sandra didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, is what I had been doing for the past 8 months professionally. I am a real estate attorney. I specialize in property disputes and estate planning. I have spent the better part of a decade reading contracts, tracing ownership histories, and identifying the exact moments when someone's legal position is much weaker than they believe it to be. I say this not to impress anyone. I say it because it explains why, when I pulled out my phone, I knew exactly what I was looking at. While Sandra was still talking, something about paint colors, something about Daniel already agreeing, something about moving on, I was opening my email. I had received something 3 days earlier that I hadn't yet processed. I had been busy. Preoccupied. Grieving, still, quietly, the way you do when the world has moved on faster than you have. The email was from the county recorder's office. A routine property alert I had set up years ago on our home address. An amendment had been filed. A deed modification. On our house. With Sandra's name attached. I had seen it in my inbox and flagged it to review later. I hadn't yet understood what it meant. Standing in my living room, watching a stranger carry my daughter's books toward the door, I read it properly for the first time. Sandra hadn't just decided to redecorate Lily's room. She had filed paperwork with Daniel's signature or something that resembled it, attempting to add herself as a co-owner of our home. The modification was recent. The notarization was dated 6 weeks ago. The filing had been routed through a document service that, as I recognized immediately, had been flagged twice by our State Bar Association for facilitating fraudulent property transfers. I looked up from my phone. Sandra was watching me with the careful expression of someone waiting to see if their story is going to hold. "Interesting," I said. That was all. She asked what I meant. I told the movers to please stop. Calmly, without looking at them with anything other than professional neutrality. They stopped. People usually do when you speak in a register that suggests you already know what happens next. I asked Sandra where Daniel was. She said he was at work, that he knew about the nursery plan, that this had all been discussed. I asked her if Daniel had signed anything recently related to the house. Something moved across her face. Quick. Careful. She said there had been some paperwork. For estate planning purposes. Something her own attorney had suggested. I nodded slowly. I told her that I had just received a property alert from the county recorder's office. That an amendment to our deed had been filed 6 weeks ago. That the document service used to file it had a documented history of facilitating unauthorized transfers. That the signature on the modification did not match Daniel's signature on file with our mortgage lender, which I happened to have photographed and stored in our legal folder. I told her this the way I would tell opposing counsel something during a deposition. Quietly. Precisely. Without heat. Her clipboard lowered about 3 inches. She tried several things in the following minutes. She said I was misunderstanding. I told her I had 17 years of legal training and the county recorder's digital record open on my screen, so misunderstanding was unlikely. She said it was just a precaution. A family arrangement. That Daniel had wanted to make sure she was protected if something happened to us. I told her I would be calling Daniel in approximately 4 minutes and that he was welcome to confirm that. She said I was being paranoid. That I was still emotional from Lily. That grief was making me see problems where there weren't any. That was the moment I felt something clarify inside me. Not anger. Something colder and more useful than anger. I looked at her and said, very quietly, that she had just walked movers into my daughter's room 14 months after we buried her, using paperwork that appeared to fraudulently modify the title to our home, and that she was now suggesting the problem was my emotional state. I told her the movers could go. That nothing was leaving the house today. That she was welcome to wait while I called Daniel, or she could leave and we could continue the conversation through counsel. She left. Daniel didn't know about the deed modification. He had signed something Sandra had described as a family emergency contact form. He cried when I showed him what it actually was. The filing was reviewed. The document service is currently under investigation in 3 counties. The modification was reversed within 6 weeks. Jason and Brittany found an apartment. Sandra has not been back to our home. Lily's room still has yellow curtains. The watercolor butterflies are still on the wall. The bookshelf is back in its corner, full of books we're not ready to move, in a timeline that belongs to us. I've thought a lot about what Sandra believed in that moment. I think she believed that grief had made me smaller. That 14 months of quiet mourning had softened something in me that she could now walk through. She wasn't entirely wrong that grief had changed me. But what she missed is that loss, when you carry it honestly and without rushing, has a way of stripping away everything that isn't essential. And what was left in me standing in that living room, phone in hand, was not a woman who was going to look away from a document she understood completely. People who take advantage of someone's pain are always calculating the wrong variable. They account for the grief. They don't account for what the grieving person has left. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever had someone confuse your silence for weakness or your stillness for surrender, you already know what I mean. Subscribe. Stay close. There are more stories here, and every one of them ends with the truth walking in through the door.